Um, let me say greetings to everyone. Thank you for coming out. I hope you had a wonderful summer. Thank you for all those people who participated with Akan Kessie this year in Washington, D.C. We had an amazing turnout, way for much bigger than what we had anticipated. So we give thanks for all those people who came out. And we're looking forward to next year, which is going to be our 10th event or 10th anniversary, which we will be in Jamaica, Montego Bay. We just got the release of the airlines on the dates and the locations and things of that nature. So we'll be releasing that information pretty soon. So that those people who wish to participate are more than welcome to come. So I want to thank the board members who are participating on this call for coming out and support it. I see Nana Samwa on. I see Nana Ama. Thank you. You're welcome to say anything if you have anything you'd like to say. You see Brother Yao Tyus also made it. Thank you, who's also one of our board members. So the work that we do at Akom Kessie is really centered around trying to have some conversations around how we can improve our lives by using the traditions that we have all migrated to for whatever reason, and just trying to get a deeper understanding of the things that we're doing and just making it applicable to our lives. So part of what we're going to do, I spoke with Nana Sakyi. A lot of you are probably already familiar with him. We had a conversation about doing something a little bit more in depth than what we have done before in reference to discussions around the culture. And what we settled on was talking about the philosophical framework of a Khan culture. And with this group in particular, we're not, whoever the people who registered for the conference, this or for this series of talks will be the same people invited back for the next. So we want the conversation to be able to evolve, and not as each time we're starting from ground level one in reference to the conversation or in terms of whatever we're learning or whatever is being taught. So we want the conversation to be able to evolve, and we want to get to some different levels of understanding. So this group of people, or the people who come in, when we do the next session, we will send out invitations just to the group of people who registered for this first session with us. Is that am I clear? Am I clear what I'm saying? So we're like closing it off. So this is it. This is the cohorts, so to speak, so that we can have a little bit more in-depth conversation. Well, the idea is to grow, and the idea is to get something from it which can be applicable to your life immediately. It's not just a philosophical exercise, but there's also some practical principles that come along with this. So everybody cool with me? Everybody cool? Any questions? And then also, we want this to really be a conversation. We don't want this to be a lecture. So you are free to interject in the conversation as we're discussing, or as Nana is discussing these concepts. We want this really to be a conversation for us to talk about. We don't want it to be like a one-way street and you're just getting information. And then, as many of you know, Nana is really, really deep. He has a lot of great information, and it's easy to go over your head. So we want to keep it like, if you're not understanding or you're not comprehending what it is, please, respectfully, Nana, I don't understand, or could you explain that again? But we really, really want this to be a dialogue. We don't really want it to be a lecture as such, but just more, we want to, once you finish this, you want to feel like you've really got something from it, you learned something, and you've elevated yourself and your spirit. So, okay. Any questions so far for me? No? All right. With that being said, then what I would like to do is I would like to introduce our speaker for this evening, or our presenter. So Nanakwekwu Sechi was born in Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago, to the parents of Kenneth and Mays Blackman. My maternal grandmother and paternal grandfather parents were both initiated / mourned as spiritual Baptists in Trinidad. As a child, growing up, it was not uncommon for Nana to practice African spiritual retentions on the island. He could not sit in doorways during certain times. If he came home after midnight, he had to walk backwards, looking ahead as to prevent jumpies from following him inside. During thunderstorms, mirrors were covered so not to attract lightning into their home. His parents immigrated to the US and took up residence in Washington, D.C., and sent for he and his sisters in 1969. With this upbringing, it was not surprising that in 1985, he became curious about exploring African spirituality and was introduced to the Akan world by Nana Kwabena Brown. Eventually, he began to possess and was initiated by Nana Parabia in 1987. He began to have dreams of a long river of the Obosun calling him to his town. He had to get there. He wrote a few letters and was invited by Nana Kofi Ifa to come and train. Alekweku Sechi's teachers were Nana Kofi Ifa, Asua Tipa Konfo, Nana Kofi Sachi, popularly known as Nana Kofi Donkor, Osobo Ten Obosunfo, and Nana Adjua Akumsa Konfo, and elder sister Nana Kofi Donkor. Nana Sechi was the first ever to go to Techiman to be initiated, graduated as a Kung Kung Bono Konfo, and brought back a Kano god in a brass pan. Through his organization, Kompa Dapa, he shares his knowledge. So with that said, I would like to welcome Nana Sechi. Thank you for doing this. And as always, you are appreciated.
Thank you very much, Nana. Greetings to everyone. Today is what we call Croufier. So I give everyone a greetings from Miami here, wishing you all a happy Croufier. It's also the Yam Festival for Tigray. So my junior brother in Techiman is celebrating his Tigray Yam Festival with his family, the Andabusia and the elders today. So today is a very momentous day. So again, I'd like to thank you all very much, and also Nana Moore, give you special recognition for all the effort in what you're doing and the belief in what you're doing, and putting together these type of venues and also working with your organization. I truly appreciate all the hard work that you're doing, and I know it's not easy, and that you have great people who are supporting you and making this successful. So I thank you very much for the effort, what you're doing, and putting forth the knowledge there so that people can gain it and use it to the best of their ability. So again, I'd like to thank you. So,
Nana Mepacho, one of the things I was talking to a sister, she actually called me about the presentation, and she was asking like, well, what are we going to do with this information? How is it going to be applicable? And one of the things that I told her, and I think it's important for everyone in this audience to know, the whole idea of this information is to put you on your path in terms of where you should be and what's important to you. So we all have some traditional paths that are unique for us. And this information is to help you clarify that path and to put you on that path. So, I mean, I started out like most of us with the Econade stuff. The Econade stuff isn't my path, but had it not been for that, I wouldn't have been able to get on my path. So this is part of that. So I think it's important for people to know that. Same thing with Nana Sechi. He started off with Nana Parabia as well, but it led him to a different path in terms of, what's true to him and his spirit. So if everybody on this call, I think you should keep that in mind as we're having this discussion and as we're moving forward. You want to be true to your spirit and what sits right with you and your spirit in terms of this a comb here or a comb that you are into or you're developing. There's several different paths and there's several different ways in terms of getting to and being affiliated with. So I wanted to say that. I'm sorry, Donna. Go ahead.
No, 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 Senpai, good what you're saying. And also to the person who texts you about what to do with this information, which I find is essential. In order to make it alive and keep it alive, it has to be functional in our lives rather than just intellectual. I mean, it's good to understand that and the knowledge and things, but also the application of how we can go about taking all of this knowledge and using it to benefit our destiny, because we all come here with a purpose. And I'm sure everyone believes that we come here with a destiny, with a purpose, and we are living that. But also, once we want to connect with something spiritual, and if it happens to be of the Akan, it doesn't matter if it's the Akan or Yoruba, whatever, you have to have something practical that links you up to that. Otherwise, there's a gap, the ocean between you and those places on the continent. So by bridging that gap, I think is by understanding who we are in this perspective and how this transmission or this connection has been severed. And I believe this is what we will all attempt to do today, to move that barrier and bridge that gap so that we can say we're practicing this culture. We have spirits from this culture. Is the spirit more connected to it than we are? And how do we solve that problem? So again, I'd like to get started. Even though I have a screen that I'm sharing, is just for bullet points, so to speak, but not for, as Nana said, lecture. And I like that concept of talking. It makes it more casual, more welcoming, much warmer, and more relatable. So that way, anything that I'm saying or anytime we can ask questions, we don't have to wait necessarily after the presentation as some time has been the format to ask questions. I welcome that very much, that we have a conversation. And the more that is there, the more we can learn from this. I too can learn from it as well as you can learn from this, and how we can go about making things very practical in our lives. So again, I thank you all very much. Okay. So again, I start out with this. Basically, this is the logo of my shrine. And which means that when you are one with the law or with the practice, we don't fear anything because we are protected by that. But also from a book that was written on Apple by Asin Hene. He says the younger generation must be taught the history and traditions to uphold all that the people hold dear as a legacy of their ancestors, so that their society could be so it would not disintegrate. And that, I think, is what we are on the path of doing. That when we begin to have more knowledge and understanding of this, and beginning to put it in practice and pass on this tradition, we're keeping it alive. So again, just bear with me. There's a saying that I think is very important in terms of understanding the spiritual aspect of the Akan. It says, "Obode santan yi fritete na obia eni hobrea onyame boade na obia ensowe tanase kosi aweye jinyame enti jinyame." So most people are familiar with the jinyame and that term, but this is where it comes from, and this is what is linked to it. And basically saying the unfolding panorama of creation has its origin in ancient time, which is like Obode Santan Yifi Tete is ancient or olden days. Yi meaning to come from that. And saying now no one was there when Onyame created things, which is basically say Obi eni hobre a Onyame buade. And so no one was there. And no one will be there when it ends except Onyame, therefore except Onyame. So let's talk about the things that we will talk about in terms of, excuse me, the lesson. And I think these terms are very important. Why do I say they're important? Because it helps us get a better understanding of who we are. If we're embarking on any type of tradition and want to understand it, we have to understand who we are as a human being from that perspective, and how do we relate to these practices that we have. So we all here, I believe, are practicing a Akan tradition. And so in practicing that, are we really involved in the stomach of a Akan tradition and practice by understanding how we view ourselves? And once we begin to have that concept in our mind, the bosom comes to our head and is attached to that, because that is where it comes from. It comes from this background. It comes from relating to people who have this understanding of themselves and how they're able to use these forces or spirits and accomplish things by understanding who you are, and how also it's transmitted, how it is passed down from generation. Because the question is it passed down through the male line, or is it passed down through the female line? And we know that the Akans are matrilineal, so things are passed down. And then what role does the male line, which is the Ntong, the Sum Sum, relates to that? So I think that's very important. So these are some of the things we'll talk about: the Kra and Krabia, Shrebia, Moja, Busia, and Tong. And Ntong is basically more used among the Bono. Most people may be familiar with it, Entoro, that I think the Ashanti and Akwapi and other people uses it, but primarily you hear that term mostly among the Bono people. Honhom, Abrabo, Supayampa, and other cultural celebrations. Like today I mentioned, there's Tigris celebrating his Yam Festival. I just came from celebrating my Yam Festival about a week ago, and on New Year. And also Asubontin, my father who trained me, celebrated his on the same day. So we both celebrate our day, our Yam Festival together. And also talk about the second part of the ancestors, the Ansamanfo, the Abosom, Abosumrafo, Motia, and Sumain, Abofo, Sasa Bonsam, Obai, and other powers. And lastly, the concept of Odomankoma, Asasea, and the creation of the Bosom, which are Asu River, Asua Lakes, Mmepo, Akwai, and Mwa, and all living things. So basically, these are some of the things we will be covering. And so I just wanted to do that. Now, I think it's important to understand the whole concept of a busia, and I'm not sure how many of you have delved fully into understanding that and the role it plays. And the question is, how do we link to that concept? We talk about, okay, there's a busia, which is the female line from an ancient ancestress. How am I connected to that? What role do I play in terms of that? We know it exists there. It is passed on, this tradition, but we here in the diaspora, in the Americas, how do we relate to that? And what do we do to make a connection if we do that? Because by all means, we know that the bosom relates to that, because it is passed on through only the female line, and therefore the Ntong line don't inherit, or the male outside of your family do not inherit it, but the male within your family can inherit it. And so how do we relate to that tradition here, as opposed that we know we will not always be here, and these spirits are here? Who is it going to pass on? And it's been my experience that sometimes they give it to someone to take care of them and to keep them for them, because they don't have a family member. The family is not embracing it. And so we have a problem in terms of legacy and passing on, because we spend a lot of our time collecting and gathering these information, learning about it. And so the time we will not always be here, what do we do? How do we take care of this legacy in future that it can pass on through our lineage unbroken? And what distinguishes these bosom as families are distinguished? And one thing you will, at least from the Bono experience and how we relate things, and you find it mostly around most Akan, that very few people have the same bosom and share the same bosom. They may have similar names, but the names are like Manu, Mensa, and Nai. So, and then they may have, for example, you have, let's say there's a bosom called Inframa. So someone possessed that. Then another person said, I too possess infirma, but is it the same one as the other person? And 9 out of 10 or all the time, it's not. It's an aspect of that bosom rather than the same thing. So they don't, even if they carry the same name, they carry an aspect. So you have like, let's say, Atiokosa Manu. So if Manu means second, so that means there's one before it. And it's not the same. One is much older, the other is another aspect or a child of it. And that way we know that you're carrying or possessing the Manu bosom rather than the main one, Panyin. And so we're not carrying the same one. It's
So no,
that.
no, Pacha, before you go any further, I would like for the people in the audience, the Akonfos, to, in terms of the first question that you asked about the inheritance of their shrines, those people that are Akonfos here, what what are their thoughts behind that, and how are they planning to have their shrines inherited um when they pass on? So I would like to hear the audience participants' thoughts on that, or has it even been anything you thought about, or if it was something you thought about, what was your solution for dealing with that?
Nanami Pacho. We have thought about it in my family. We've already had discussions about who would care for the shrine, who would take care of them after I'm gone. One of my sons is a Kung Fu also. So it was a part of our planning conversation for the future. And we hope and pray that our children will embrace the culture the way we have. So we teach them, and we can only hope that they accept it and hold on to it the way we have.
Now, that's a very interesting. I like that because that's the way we start preparing for the future. But also, we have to bear in mind that sometimes even one of your children can attract its own bosom and not necessarily, but you will have one who will carry on the main one. So since you are the elder in the family and the first to carry the bosom, that means that bosom is the oldest and the most important one in the family, and others will be secondary. And that would be the one which will pass on forever through the Abusia line because you're the one who gave birth to that bosom, which came first. And so if your children happen to possess one, a lot of times it could be another one that is a part of the family, but minor. Case in point, when I trained in Ghana, Nana Kofi Donko, who trained me, his sister also had a bosom called Akumsa, and she was named after that bosom. So we're saying, well, there's a Subontin, which has, she has a Kumsa, and they're brothers and sisters. Which one is the elder? Well, Akumsa is. Akumsa is the head of the town. There's a town called Akumsa Dumasi, and Akumsa is a parent or the elder of a Subontin, and it comes from that lineage. And so they're part of that family that sometimes Bosom comes with more than one, and it will be attracted to different children within the family. So that also is something we have to bear in mind, is a possibility as well.
All right. Nana Afua Chedwa, she had your hand raised.
Yes, I'm a proud to my dad to everyone, my Joe. I'm kind of like at the other end of the spectrum. I'm like the only one in my bushra who sought out the cultural and spiritual and traditional aspect of the um, Akan culture. And so the shrine that I carry would be the oldest one, but the adults in my family, sisters and brothers, are not in the tradition. And my father was in Yoruba tradition, but he's an ancestor. So I'm in a quandary about how that lineage would be passed on, but I still delve into the culture and different aspects of it to continue to educate myself and live what I can. I have two nieces that um, they're on the periphery, but they appreciate that I am the one in the tradition and that they can come to me. But traditionally and spiritually, they aren't in the tradition at this point in their lives, and they are adults, and one of them has children, so they're more or less kind of caught up in the Western society of making a living and whatnot. But if there's things that they need that I can assist from a spiritual and cultural and traditional point of view, that they know that they can come to me. So mine is still evolving, I guess, or unfolding. I'm just, yeah.
So you haven't figured out yet how you would pass this information or pass your shrine to someone else at this point. You're still figuring it out.
I'm still figuring it out, but the two that will be my candidates are either one of my two nieces, and they're first cousins. And I think one is more open to it because she has at least come to my event. She came to my outdooring when I finished the priesthood training, she and her brother. Um, and they have both come over to visit me on occasions, you know, for different type of guidance or, advice. So I'm looking at those two, but I don't know. Yeah, I'm still figuring it out. So
Okay.
But Nana, I like what you're saying, and it's very important to understand that. And also, it's important to understand what path you set your bosom on. That's crucial. It's going to behave according to the path you set it on. And given what your concerns are, that means the path will determine the results. For example, in the training that I have, the bosom is part of the busia. Within the busia, you have male and female. The male is called Obosomfo, even though I've heard that term referred to differently here, but it doesn't matter. It's a matter of how your culture looks at it is what's important. Others may look at it a different way, others may look, but that's irrelevant. It's consistency. And the Okomfo represents the female. So what I'm saying is that they have both male and female. So within our lifetime, if we are male, we want the bosom to be attracted to a female that we can witness and see for ourselves. If it is female, you want the male, and if it's male, you want it to be attracted to female. So it has both aspects. And the next one, if you being female, it will not attract it while you are alive, because you can't have two matter occupying the same space, two comfort sharing the same bosom. In our tradition, you can't, that does not exist, because the power will choose one, always the stronger one, and the other one, something bad will happen to them. So you want both male and female. So part of this is that your dilemma, don't struggle your head to solve this, put it on the bosom. The bosom has come here to assist us and help us navigate this environment. It comes from a long tradition where this exists. So when we go to the bosom, we can say, Nana, this is my concern, that I'm thinking of the future of my bosom, of you, and that after I am not here, that someone within the family will take on the responsibility. And then you plead with the bosom and ask the bosom what it will require from you so that it can take one while you are alive, meaning a male. It could be your son, or it could even be your brother. It could be any male family which is part of the same abusia to be attracted to, but never the female, because you are the female. And so a matter of that is putting the weight on the bosom rather than struggling and worrying yourself about what to do about this. Let the bosom carry the weight. And once they carry it, you remove it from your mind, from your heart. You don't worry about it anymore. But again, it's finding out what this bosom would require in order to make that a reality. And that is what we're talking about, trying to find practical means to make this something that we can function with and live. I don't know if that makes any sense to you or not, but
yes, Nana, it does. As a matter of fact, our last session, you mentioned that about addressing and handing it over to the bosun.
Yes, always.
And I was reminded of that when you spoke just now, and
Mhm.
that's really helpful because it is a weight just knowing that the different that I don't have any children. I've got nieces and nephews. I do have a brother, and so he would be the one.
Yes.
He could or could not, but that really helps put it into perspective and makes it more workable as opposed to stressing or fretting about that. So I definitely appreciate this information. I can use this.
Just like within the whole family tree, you're the one chosen, right?
Yeah,
And the bosom came to you. Give
yeah,
it the same scenario, that it's the same thing, except it wants a male. And it will choose it just like it chose you. It will choose one. And so, of course, it depends on what rituals and what is need to be done. And I think as we begin to put the bosom in a framework from which it is familiar with, because we have to keep in mind that this has been around for a long time and it's a part of a culture that has existed. So it's ingrained in it. Just the fact because we are here don't mean this is not still part of the nature of the bosom. It is just waiting for us to get to the stage where we are on that level so it can function. And I think that's what we are talking about in the first lesson of how do we get the bosom to function in that way, and it's how it uses our sum sum in order to function that way, and how do we update the bosom to function in a way that is not functioning. What do we do? So you hear many stories about, oh, the bosom is old, it's moving slow, it's like an old man or it's like an old woman and it's functioning. So we have to rejuvenate it to basically revive it and get it to be more vibrant, because sometimes that happens to bosom. They do not function properly and there's something. So we say it's either the relationship with the okomfo or the relationship in the environment where the bosom is, that something is preventing it from functioning. And most of the time it's some form of taboo or something that we're not doing or should do to make the bosom function. And sometimes what type of rituals we do in order to enhance that aspect of the bosom to function a certain way and to motivate it and inspire it to function that way. And that's the role we serve. Just like when we pour libation, we don't just pour, you are infusing your words and your sum into that liquid, which is like ink, and you're writing on a tablet or you're writing on a paper. As that liquid falls down, it is taking those words and your sum and putting it into some type of form by which the bosom or the ancestors can read and function with. And it's you're leaving a blueprint there for it to say, do this. And so I think that is something to give good consideration to and find out what it is that you need to see how the spirit is functioning and operating. Because if you are using it in the way that you see the results of it, why not if you ask it for this? Someone come to you, they ask for help, and you go to the bosom and it helped them, it works. Another person come for this issue and you see the bosom, it works. So you have this belief, it functions. So if I say to the bosom such and such and such a thing, it works. And then when you do the rituals, you give it a symbol or something that is part of the sacrifice or the ritual to say, what I say, I use my tongue, and what I give of the neck of the throat represents a sacrifice. You put the two together, give it to the shrine, and say, this is true, function this way. And then you are basically enhancing and motivating the spirit to function that way.
Madasi Pa, Nana. Madasi, this is very good.
Yes, okay, good, thank you. Okay, so let's
Hey,
go ahead.
Alana, are there any other Okonfo that could probably chime in on this in terms of their plans for how they plan to pass on their shrines and their families? We want this to be
Greetings. This is a Kompo Aman Yamache. I just want to just to say that I'm grateful for this discussion and for the Kompo asking the questions, because it's similar except that there's nobody to pass it on to in
Mhm.
my that I know of. This limited family that I do have there's not a, connection in terms of tradition or communication. So the question that he told us to ask the shrines, how should I plan, for your succession after I physically leave, is, that resonated. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Nana. Yes, it's a reality we all have to face here, that they're not facing at home on the continent. So what we have, we spend too much of time to do something for naught. We're doing this for something. And part of it is to motivate and elevate us as people. And also this the conversation, hopefully it will go this way. Water always seeks its level. And to just use the analogy about, just to go off topic quite a bit, I'm going way off. In Zen Buddhism, the Buddha could not find anyone in India, supposedly. So he traveled to China to find someone to pass on the lineage. So sometimes we may have to travel and find our family tree that is somewhere other than where we are. And again, this is the role the bosom will lead us to that. And we put that function in. And I think that would be the continent. Because if we're saying we are African descent, and if we are saying we come from somewhere on the continent, we have to at one time or another have a link still there in our busia. It's not falling, it's not destroyed. You say abusia jayin chano. We haven't cut the link of our busia, and it still exists there. Maybe through the whole access, someone to one of the islands or another part of the Caribbean or somewhere in the continent. How do we know this? Again, it goes back to what I talk about. Put the weight on the bosom to take us and lead us to that, to find its link, because part of that is that it becomes a part of it. Now, there's another issue we have to take into consideration. Sometimes some bosoms are born for the first time and has never been here and possessing another person. And you become that person that starts that tradition. So that being said, in time, it hasn't been passed on through generation to generation. It starts with you. So it's new. So how do you make that connection? You can still make the connection by knowing the family. And if you're not able to find it, you can leave it there. It's a risk. But if you believe that the bosom have led you, because it had to come from somewhere. The question is, do you believe the bosom comes from this hemisphere or from the continent? Let me ask you a question. Where do you believe your bosom comes from?
Well,
Continent.
I think who you asking, me or the other
Yes,
one?
the one we're
Okay.
just talking about. Yes.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
I think that it's both. Well, the two that I have, I think it's both. I know one of them, in terms of the story, that this Bosun trapped the priest who had the Bosun deliberately traveled here during the Ma'afa to make sure that, I guess I'm asking my own question, to make sure
You
that,
already answered definitely where it came from.
yeah, that it maintained itself, but also to provide the healing for the people who were traveling, who were being taken on the ship, other way to put it. So I believe it's a combination, and then some personal information in reference to that, in terms of the Bosun saying that they were with me when I was a child and watched me, and they made some reference to a particular scenario that I remembered, I guess to say that they've been watching me until, yeah. So
So
that's why
again,
I think it's both.
so again, I go back to get clarity, Nana, that if it traveled with you, that meaning it came from somewhere place.
Mhm.
So where is this place that it came from?
I know it came from Ghana, Ashanti
Okay.
in particular.
Okay, so there we go. So that means it has a strong connection with that town.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to have a strong connection with an abusia of that town.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow you have to be connected to that abusia if it traveled with you specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, the bosom knows this. Reverse it, send it back to make that link again. Because, and this is something we will go through in this. That's why I like this conversation. I don't have to follow this structure here that I have on the screen, but
Mm-hmm.
let the conversation dictates what we are, where we're going. Is that part of this is understanding that if the bosom comes from a town, and we understand what is the predominant abusia within that town, and also the names that are attached to that town and the chief, all of that is connected. And the bosom is connected to that. So that when we say, somehow I'm attracted to this town, it comes from this town. Therefore, some connection ancestrally with you have to be a part of that town. It's just doing the work and putting the bosom to work to say, who is that link within
Mm-hmm.
that town with me? Find yourself. It's almost like birds that you put out there somehow have this gravitational field they can follow and say, up north, we're going here. It's getting cold, we're going down south, or vice versa. They just innately know what to do. The bosom does it, just like how you see that airports, they have these sniff dogs, they can sense whether you have something on you or not. It does that. So the bosom will function the same principle. The way it knows who its family is. All we have to do is provide the means by which it can do that. And how do we do that? Is by what we're addressing here, is understanding what our intong is, what our busia is, what our sunsum, and how our destiny, or krabia, and shabia, all of this relates to us. Because it's all part of how the bosom functions. And so as we begin to clarify that and begin to understand these things as ourselves, the bosom has something it can use in our soul, our sunsum, and guide us. And it can come and show you through dreams, or just by coincidence, I don't know why I end up in this town, in this place, meeting this family for some reason, what it is. And this is what we're talking about, that you can do like what people do, the DNA testing to say, okay, generally I come from this. You can be even more specific. The bosom can be just as specific as doing this DNA testing because it is a part of that tradition. And I think as we begin to use the bosom to do these things, it helps us navigate our life. And that's what they're here for, to be connected to the family so that tradition can be passed on. So it's never no one there that it can't. Maybe in this hemisphere, we can say that, but there, where it comes from, we definitely can make that connection. Of course, it's the work, but again, as I mentioned earlier, if you know the bosom works and you divine to someone and you say, this is your problem, and you see it's true and they believe it, and you do rituals that work, why won't it work if you say, find the town where it is, and this bosom can lead you to that town, or go to some Okomfo and get divination so they can tell you. But you've said, they've told you this bosom traveled with you from birth. So why not answer the question? Okay, from where, from who did it travel? And if they can tell you that much, they should be able to tell you the other question, answer the other question that you had.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that makes sense, I guess, for all of us. I mean, all of
Exactly.
us who were here, we got the shrines here who didn't necessarily physically go to Ghana per
Traveled with
se.
us.
Yeah, but they're with us. So
That's our story, that we have our connection. We all have that. And the thing about it, each one is unique, just like you're unique. Your blood is unique. Your whole tradition of how you are as a human being is unique. And that bosom is connected to that. And so we can do that. And I think it's time we begin to look at it in that sense and begin to try to bridge that gap, because it's how it is. It's how it comes from. Maybe not everyone is curious about doing that. That's fine. But if you are,
mm-hmm.
that's the work we have to put in, and that's the approach. And that's the way we now help to make the bosom in the capacity or how give it the capacity to do this. And that's where it comes to like using a popular term, update. You have different medicine, like in training. Part of this, all of this goes back to training. All these answers and questions should be answered during your training process of that 3 years. And when you finish that training, you don't have any much questions there other than how to solve problems. And I think that is what we have to begin to understand. What is the purpose of learning, training, or home? And in our tradition, you bathe hundreds of plants. I mean, you don't use soap. We don't use soap to wash spiritually in any way. We use only water from plants, roots, not too much leaves. That's for a different function, but mainly roots. We bathe this medicine and we scrub with a brode, plantain fiber to clean our bodies. And we do this for 3 years. No other water except the water of plants do that. Now, what is the purpose of these plants? Each one has a function. So the person training you will say, okay, you're having this issue with the bosom. It's not functioning this way. Then this plant, we give it to it to solve that problem. Then after another problem comes up, you say, okay, how is my bosom going to solve? Then we give this plant to do that. Oh, people are attacking me and they're spiritually, all things that do. Then you give it this to do. I'm not saying properly. I see some things, but sometimes it's not clear. Then we give you that medicine to do that. And by doing all of this, you're updating your bosom to function in that capacity that these plants are. So it's very much like you take any object and put a lot of honey or something sweet on it. It will attract an ant. You don't want it to attract one ant because that represents, the ant represents the power, just symbolically. So that's only one. That means it's not powerful. Attract two, but with hundreds of ants come, that means more of the power of the bosom has come. And the honey represents the different plants that you have in, or medicine that is in your body that can attract that bosom to you to function more. So that's why we say that sometimes that when the Akonfo bathes medicine, Adru, they have to wear, they don't need a lot of suman. You only need suman when you don't have the power to protect yourself from the power of the bosom. So the more suman you wear, meaning you need more medicine to protect yourself because the power of the bosom can harm you. It can injure you. So you're bathing all of these plants to strengthen your sunsum, to strengthen your body so that more of the bosom can come within you and not what we call akomtre, meaning you're pulling it, but it doesn't fully come. It comes halfway. So you want it to come total and complete. The only way you can do that, you spend 3 years of bathing night and day, 3-4 times a day, these different plants, and that way it goes into your skin, goes into the muscle and get into the bloodstream and even into the bones. That's what my teacher said. He said, you want it to go into your bones. That medicine says there for life. Because I asked him, how long would it last? He said, for your lifetime, if you bathe enough. But part of it is like what we talk about in terms of premiato, when we say, when the sun is high above, it's pressing on our sunsum into the earth, and we don't like that. So that's why we don't do a lot of work during that time. So, but in this case, you want that concept to exist with the medicine. Each one you put, you wanted to press on you, into you, deeper and deeper, and push the previous one deeper. This one come deeper and deeper, and each time it goes deeper into your skin. And like my teacher always used to say, oh, you say, we're going to spoil your skin. He said, we are here to spoil your skin. And Nanifa used to tell me that all the time. And I'm thinking, you mean bad skin? What do you mean at the beginning? But then I begin to understand what he's saying, that this medicine, it does change the texture of your skin. It changes the texture of your blood, your muscles, your whole being. And that is what attracts the bosom. So I think once we get that in place, we can do anything with the bosom. And they can do anything with us. But it's getting that, and that to me is part of the training to solve these problems so we can use the bosom to solve all of these questions that we're encountering.
So let me ask another question then. For those people who are not Akonfo that are in the audience, what question do you have surrounding this particular topic? I mean, you're affiliated with the culture in some manner, but you're not an Akonfo. So how does this relate to you? in terms of your living or your daily living, or how are you interested in continuing the culture since am I making any sense for those people who are not haven't been trained or necessarily assigned to a shrine? Hello?
If not, I can answer that for them, because that is something that I made a note of to address, because we have both layperson and professional people who are here, meaning those who are Kung Fu and those who are not. So it's very much the same way that they don't have a Busum or family Busum, so they go to a Kung Fu to get help. So part of that is that those who are curious and want to find that, they go to the shrine or to a one who they know is reputable and who can help them and has the power to help them, to guide them in that way. And sometimes your destiny ends up in a very precarious way. Sometimes you say, okay, I'm just going to the continent to just visit, but something leads you to a town. You don't know why. Let's say they did work and they want to find that out. And the priest did the work, the Kung Fu did the work. And so they said, okay, we've done the work. Let's see what happens. And so they say, okay, I'm traveling to the continent. I'm going on vacation, but something leads them to a particular town, leads them to a particular family. And so they don't know, but they may say, okay, I don't feel a connection here. Then something takes them somewhere and say, I feel a connection here. So in essence, that bosom can lead them to that right connection where they can solve that and say, I don't know what brought me to this town. I don't know what brought me to this family. And they gave me a name for some reason. They have adopted me, taken me on as part of them. And so it's a matter, once these things happen, to pursue that even deeper and say, okay, is this part of my obusia? Am I part of this? And then one can inquire, because here, what do? You do a DNA testing to find if there's a match. I don't know how it will function in rural, in the village, or in the town in Ghana or anywhere in the continent. You may not have that capability, or if it does, you may have to travel to the city to do that. But we have the spirits. So therefore, we can, again, not necessarily challenge the bosom, but put it to work to say, am I connected to this? And get the bosom to convince you. And then after that, you get it supported. Go somewhere else where no one uses it and inquire. And they say the same thing, because you hear many stories like that. People did commit offense and the bosom say, no, I'm going to punish you. Then they go to another bosom and the bosom would not forgive. Then they go to another town and say, okay, can you petition this bosom to beg me? And said, no, the bosom will not forgive. Totally unaware of your situation. Then they go to a third place and they come up with the same answer. So again, you're seeing that connection, that each bosom is connected and they're all saying the truth. So we can also use that same principle to help solve our problems in terms of these issues about our link. So I think the difference, the Kung Fu is using their own bosom themselves to do that and getting verification. The others is a person is going to a bosom and it is leading and directing them to that area, that town, to get verification. So a lot of it again is understanding what our Sun Sun is, understanding our destiny and what leads us. And once we tap into that and we purify it from any contamination or any taboos, and even though the saying is "wo sun sume dru," meaning you want to have a heavy sun sun, which means it is able to be strong and protective of you. In this sense, I'm just changing a little. You want it light in the sense to free from things that are weighing it down, trauma, envy, jealousy, hatred. All of these things contaminate and affect our sun sun, which impedes us and affects our ability to do these things. So we want to have our sun sun clean, pure, what they call fita, so that it is able to do that, so that in the dream world, you can see your town. In your dream world, you can see things. Your bosom will come and lead you, or the ancestors would lead you to these places, and you find yourself going there. And that way is because you'll have no contamination, nothing that is holding you back in terms of your spirit, no trauma or anything like that. And I think this is also something we have to really begin to take into consideration in terms of understanding what our sum sum is, the entone, or moja, nkrabia.
So Nana, speak a little bit more about the process of purifying your
Okay,
spirit.
right. Okay. So we say okrajari, meaning purify the soul. So that has to do with the day which you're born. The day which you're born is infused in your body. And I'm hoping we have all adults here that we can talk as adults, pretty much in terms of the aspect of the power women have, and it's we'll talk. I'll get it out. So the thing is this, you know, your kra, the day that you're born, is like a busum in many ways. And in fact, we treat it, if you see the rituals that we do when we purify the soul, we sacrifice to it, we call it, and we release it of anything that may be burdening it. So it involves, of course, a chicken, drink, yam, eggs, and the shells. Why? Each one represents something. The shells, the egg, and the yam are all fita white. We use nyame, well, Spanish call it nyame, or baire, we use white egg. We use kosia fita, white egg, and also the shells. And when you're doing these rituals, you are saying it means something. We give it the yam because the yam is integral in our celebration, the egg because what the egg represents life, and the shell meaning that I'm overcoming anything because you're able to crack it. So in terms of rituals, when you give the shells or do rituals with it, you're saying it is easy to crack than a bone, which is hard, or a seed. So the shells represent to the bosom whatever problem you have, it's easy for you to solve that way.
Excuse me, when you're saying shells, you're talking about
Shells of the egg. The
cowrie
egg.
shell? Okay,
No,
eggshells.
no, no. The shells of the egg is part of the ritual.
Okay.
And then you need a plant called dra. Here they call it, I think, it's portulaca. It's a very fleshy type of plant. I don't know if it grows up north. Maybe it does because of the cold weather. Even here, I have challenged growing it here. But fita dra is what we use for purifying the soul or any contamination. So when one comes into contamination or come into taboo, or you come in contact with a woman at her menses, or eating the wrong food, which is taboo, we can use this to purify our soul, or kra, or sumsum, and water. And it's bosu, you strike the tongue and you spray it out. And so once that is done, we use the chicken over this stuff that we just talked about, the yam, the shells, and egg, and you have 7 of them. And we know why the Akan's odd numbers are better than even numbers. And we never go to the busum with even numbers, always add odd numbers, except for 5, because 5 is a number of regret. So we never give the busum 5, but 3 to 7 is good. So you ask it to come and eat, and the chicken will stand over the food. It won't eat. Then that means there's something you're holding on to that is not freeing yourself. So in essence, it acts as a means of confessions, for lack of a better word. You say what's troubling your sumsum. Maybe somebody's bothered it, maybe a family member has, or maybe you've done things you should not have, or you have some regret. All of these things you want to get rid of because it's impeding the progress of the soul, which is the day you're born on. Sometimes maybe one feel I don't get the support with my shrine from the family, then the family will say, okay, I understand you've worked hard at this and this is important and we are supporting you. And so all of this lightens the burden of the soul. And then once you go through that, the chicken will peck 3 times. Then you slaughter the chicken around that stuff. Then you pluck 7 of its wings and put it in there because the wings represents the soul being able to travel. And then after that, you cook the food and you give it to 7 parts to the sacrifice. the head and the feet. Put the feet of the chicken in the feet of the chicken in the mouth. Why? Because you want your head and your actions to be one. You're going to say this, support it. Don't say something and mean something else. So you're saying to yourself, to your sum sum, to your cra, whatever I do, whatever I say will always be truthful, and my action would represent that. And if you're dealing with things, you're saying the ancestors and the spirits that I'm working with, I want to have that kind of relationship with them as well. Then the neck represents a support, because if you have a head without a neck, you don't have a good support. So it represents a foundation. And whatever you need to do to get a foundation, whether it's through knowledge, understanding the culture, these things that are part of it, that, you know, the Abramo, the gold weights, Sisidra, the stools, Eme, the proverbs, Ochame Puma, the Chame staff, Chinia Puma, the umbrella, all of these things are knowledge part that in support and help each other. So you're saying, I will get this foundation of understanding that this is part of me. So when the bosom come or when my soul come, it can use this to guide me. Then after that, you give it the chest. So say, I'm confident and I'm bold in what I'm doing. I have no doubt in what I'm saying and what I'm doing. I will not back up. I will not go falter. I am confident in what I'm doing in my belief. There's no doubt. Then the waist, because the waist represents fertility, potency, that we're able to do that. So all of this is what you're saying to your cra, that you will be prosperous. If I want to find out where my destiny and family is, it will be accomplished. If I want to write a book, it will be successful. I want to start a business, I will be able to do it. And you're saying all of this to your cra to function that way. Then you give it the waist, meaning kataso, to protect, that your sum sum will be heavy and strong to protect you from negativity and forces and to alert you of this stuff. Just like your immune system will protect the body from organisms and virus that it can come in, it knows what to do. So your sum sum will behave that way. Right. Then after you give it the liver, so you're saying the liver represents sweetness, a good life. We know life has its challenges and difficulties, so I'm giving it this to say, yes, we know life sometimes is challenging and thing, but I want to get a sweet life, that things will be always work out, that I'm happy and content, never bitter, never resentful, because again, we're going backwards and attaching things to the sum sum or the kra, which we don't want. And then the afode, which is an organ, I call it, I only know the tree name. I think now you know the English name. You told me once, didn't you? But this is a round organ that we say is like a term, a lucky organ, that is say, when all around me doubt that I can do this, even if the earth is crumbling beside me, I will not falter, I will not waver, I will not give up my belief. When people say, nah, you're going to make it, I didn't know if you were going to make it, you never faltered. And so you will always have that belief. And so you give that. So all of these things is what you want to attract to your sum sum, to your kra. So when you go about business, you're able to do this, because by doing these rituals, the only way it can function is if you get rid of all the distractions, all the things that are holding your soul back and that's preventing you from progress, all the trauma of history that we get attached to can sometimes hold us back. All the problems with dealing with our daily life and our homes and the domesticity can sometimes support and hampers us and hold us back. And you see that even in terms of relationship, marriage, and you see that when you go consult, you say the bosom didn't come. Why? Or the priest and his wife was not in agreement, so the bosom won't come. Why? Because he has something in his mind that is worrying him. If the bosom becomes contaminated by that thing, by that thought and action, and the bosom must always be pure. No matter what, you keep your shrine in a pure state and your shrine there, so you're not allowing taboo or contamination to come into the shrine, into the bosom, which would affect it. And also you don't want it in your mind, because if whatever is in your mind affects your bosom. So that's why we say nyakum, nyakum. Not all comb is a comb. Sometimes they say if the comb is stupid, the bosom is stupid. I hear this while training. They said, oh, the comb is not bright. The bosom isn't bright. Why? Because he's using your soul to do that. So we work very hard to do that. And once we do that, there is no limitation on what we can do with the bosom, because you are pure in heart, mind, and spirit and thoughts. and do it. So again, that's part of the ritual. It's a bit lengthy.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I know what you just dropped a bunch of pearls and diamonds and gold and whatever else in terms of what you just talked about in terms of the purification of the spirit. So for if any of these Okonfos that are on here now, if they need assistance with this, would you be willing to help them?
of course, yeah. Yeah, because it's about us helping each other. Like, you know, they say, what fraud you are. When you find a good tree to climb, we push you up. And that's what we have to do. Part of this knowledge is not just is to help us gain, and it puts us on a path again and resetting things so that we can do. And a lot of it has to do with traditional knowledge and that which works and that which makes sense to you. So definitely, I'm willing to do that. You know, they're willing to accept it by all means. Teach them this so they can do it for their clients. They can do it. It's like every Yam festival, I purify my soul. I cry. And on my birthday, I don't want cake. I don't want all this stuff. Purify my soul. That's to me is the ultimate. Do that. That's better than eating cake. It's better than going out to dinner, which I don't do anyway. It's better than anything. Purify my cry. You give me that as a gift, oh, I'll be happy as can be. Because that way it is helping my soul to lighten this burden. So definitely that is something that we have to really consider. And most of all, I can't reiterate taboos. We have to know taboos, personal taboos, our shrine taboo, and also our family taboo. You can see things in the family that generationally we should not do. Again, this is going back to the abusia and all of that. So these are things we need to really take seriously and pay attention to. I
So
can't emphasize taboo enough.
So I think that it's important to re-emphasize. So, when we're talking about taboos, we have generally three levels of taboos. We have our
Right.
personal taboos, we have our shrine taboos, and then we have
Mhm.
our national taboos as a community in terms of what those things are. What Nana is describing in terms of with those taboos, especially those personal taboos, that are associated with your family and things of those nature is really, really important to know and to be aware of. So, and then again, that goes back to the connection to that family. So maybe it's a sacred animal that helped your family to get some particular place, and there was a vow that was made not to harm this particular animal, which
Mhm.
becomes taboo to you. Knowing those things is critical.
Yeah.
Most
And
of us aren't aware of them because we need to go back and do that research and to establish those connections.
I'd like to add one more to your list, procreative taboo. So there are taboos for procreation as well. And that is a very important as long as the woman is in her fertile state and she is married and wants to produce children, she has to observe taboos of the husband. After she passes menopause, she said, I don't have to eat your, I can eat your taboo now. It's personal. I no longer have to adhere to it. So again, that also is another type of taboo to take into consideration.
I know we
Any,
went, I'm sorry, go ahead, Nana.
no. I was just going to say any more questions, but go ahead now.
I know we're kind of a little off topic. We're kind of off on topic.
Well, yeah, but it's a conversation. We're having a conversation. I'll bring it back on, That's why I have these notes here. So even I go off, I can come back. So let's continue again about uh the whole concept of a human being, Onipa, of how the Akans view a person. So the Akans view, basically the whole concept of a human being, two entities that come into play of conception of a masculine and feminine principle that comes together to create life. And one is associated with blood, which is connected to your abusia. And that's what they call the XX chromosome. No matter what, female carries the XX chromosome. And it's quite interesting. Who determines the sex? It's the man. He carries XY. The female don't determine. It's the man. If he gives her an Y, XY, it's going to be a boy. If he gives her an X, she'll have a girl. So in essence, the intone is the determinant factor. And that brings into here understanding the conceptual taboo of the intone. So I'm putting it back on track to say that that is something that we need to really consider in terms of procreation, because sometimes, you say, why there no conception between a couple? Then we have to ask the question, say, is there some type of connection historically here between me and this person that the spirit is preventing? We know slavery is very traumatic and has traumatized people greatly, more or less, and that families has been splintered and migrated, and then we meet and we don't know that connection. Sometimes you get together with someone you don't know. You just don't know. And therefore, if you're on a spiritual path, conception may not take place or will not take place, because that's exogamy, the taboo. In tongue marrying in tongue, abusia marrying busia. If you're part of the same abusia, they do not marry. If you're part of the same in tongue, you do not marry. So again, conception would not take. So one has to understand that. And sometimes it may be functioning without our awareness, and we may not think about it, but that's why these certain laws are put into place, that family do not procreate with each other because of these reasons. It may be a law without explaining the spiritual ramification, but in the Akan tradition, they're clear and succinct about that. So again, understanding this whole concept of conception between the male and tongue, spiritual, the sum, female, the blood represents the abusia, that which is permanent. Why is it permanent? Because the woman always carries XX. She's consistent as can be. The man is carrying XY, he has, those things, but she is consistent. So that's why inheritance and things are always passed on through the line of the mother. Anything that is inheritable, whether it's property, wealth, or busum, or family heirloom, is always through the line of the mother. And, we all know the saying, we may not know who the father is, but we know who the mother is, because she gave birth. So that's very important. So again, we talk about the Abusia Muja when the two come together, and how the Sung Sung represents that spiritual part of you, and also is associated with the Intong, and how what we're talking about, that is what we use to fortify ourselves and to change our reality in this world, is by using our Sung Sung, which you can call your willpower, for lack of a better word. But also the Sung Sung is very complex in the sense that, as I mentioned earlier, it can be heavy in this sense. And I'll use the term light to separate it from the purification, which I was talking about, light in the sense that is easily influenced. So meaning, and I'm a boxing fan, yes I am, and you watch these one and they want to say who's going to blink. What is the whole concept of that? To say whose Sum Sum is weaker or stronger is what it's all about. And on that sense is what happens. We know children listen to the adult because their Sum Sum hasn't fully developed. It's weak. So you're able to get them to do things, or say, you better do this, or X, Y, and Z. But then they get to that stage as that Sum Sum begins to develop, they kind of want to challenge you a little. So that's telling you your Sum Sum is maturing. It wants to become a little more independent. And so is it going to stay weak as in that child state, or become strong and heavy, that it will want to do that? But then you have to change and manage the character so it doesn't become disrespectful and all of that. So the Sum Sum itself has, I like to say, sometimes it has no morality. Sometimes it doesn't care about right or wrong. And it doesn't seem to care about anything. So we have to basically change it and discipline it through what is called brabo, by living a moral or a good life in terms so that it can behave properly. And we see that in the dream world. It will do anything, but we have to discipline it. So, but once we have a discipline, it's very strong within us. So again, that's one thing. Then we have what is called krabia, which is a very complex word to deal with, because the krabia is a compound word of kra and bia. So I discovered that word through being in Ghana, through eating, and also mainly through traveling. I first remember and this was part of my training, and in front of my teacher, one of his senior priests he trained, I was called to go and eat. And so someone came and said, Nana, your food is ready, go and eat. And he stopped me. He said, what did he want? So he's saying, you're going to eat alone. You don't tell me. So I'm not inviting him. So kra means to notify. And also when you're going to a place, you come and say, me krawo, me ko abwabo, or me krawo, we go in Kranza. I'm notifying you, I'm going somewhere. Now that's an interesting concept because this is what the soul is doing on the spiritual life. It is notifying at a particular place, at a particular spot, in a certain manner of way. Before Nyame, that the krabia represents that function of the kra that is leaving. And we don't know what the day is, the determinant we don't know. Is it Dwada, Binadai, Yauda, Wukwera? Which day of the week? We don't know, but it's saying I'm going and coming on this day. And so that is also very significant, and we call that a kra day. So it notifies that. So again, we have to understand that concept of our spirit and also how it's applicable to us in nature. And one thing I always emphasize, and my family knows, if you want to understand the spiritual world, understand the world you're living in. The rules and things that govern it to a large degree is what functions in the spiritual world to some degree. I'm not saying it's an exact mirror, but nonetheless, they influence each other. So we have to be cognizant of that. So again, we talk about a krabia, and then we have the shrebia, which is the destiny. The shrebia represents like me shape me a taddy and putting on my shirt. So I'm me shape me a taddy. So, and again, the manner by which we're doing, and I use the analogy of like a suitcase. You're planning on a trip, you're going somewhere. So you're notifying the family, I'm going on this trip, again, in krabia, and you're packing for this trip. Things that you think you will need on that journey. And also that is what the soul is doing. It's packing things that it will need at a certain time. That's why when we are trying to do things and it doesn't happen because it's not the right time or space. It's not the place. It's there, a part of your destiny, but it's not the time. So timing is very important. And it's the same thing with what you're packing. You're wearing this outfit based on the occasion. And so things happen according to when we are ready, when the time is right. And so that we begin to unpack. And so that's what we bring with us as we come to this earthly plane. So we have their shibya. And then all of this now is fashioned by Abrabo, by how we live our life, the morality and the things that we do, our upbringing, shapes and mold all of this. And that, to a large degree, goes back to the entone, the male spirit, is what is basically important in one's socialization. You know, they have stories in Ghana where they say when the child is disobedient or something is wrong and the father is not in the house, they will take it to the father because his intone will support and nourish that of the child and also help give it guidance because there's a strong connection between the male and his children, whether male or female, they both have his intone, you know. So only the male can carry it because it is associated with semen or sperm, that because which is associated with water, because these intone spirits are all part of rivers, lakes, and some body of water. And again, that represents a spiritual thing because it's always moving and seeking out. So again, those are things we begin to understand. And one thing I must talk about, the sum of how vulnerable it is, that we associate the sum in a spiritual level when you go to sleep, you go out and you dream, and you're experiencing that world where you travel. Again, it goes back to what we talk about, the ritual of purifying your soul, that you put those 7 feathers there so it can travel, gain knowledge, gain access to things. So you want it to do that. You don't want it to be landlocked. So that being said, that on earth, your sum is also connected to your shadow to a large degree. And what proved that to me is that I had to go collect a plant called humatre. Humatre is a very powerful plant. There's a kung fu, you need this. You're going to get this medicine. You're going to bathe this for X amount of days. So you go out into the forest. So my junior brother and I went out to cut this plant. And he said, you're going to cut it. You're going to cut it. I said, okay. He said, but a shadow cannot cross its shadow. no matter what, make sure your shadow and its shadow doesn't connect. Because if you cut it, you cut your life. And so I had to be very careful, making sure my shadow is away from this plant while I cut its root. And so I'm alive to say I did not cut the shadow, mine didn't cut. So again, that's a part of the sum sum as well. And that's the early shadow. And I mentioned earlier, premature, is that the sun at high point is very dangerous for us as a kung fu. And we don't do too much work at that strain because of our sun sun, because the sun is pressing us and the shadow is under our feet. It gets closer and closer, closer to our body as the sun is straight up ahead. And it's like they say the sun's energy is pushing our soul into the earth, and we don't want this. And so we avoid the sun. That stage, of course, who does? I mean, everybody 12 you walk around. But on a spiritual level, for us, it's very important. And that's why we do not do work at the shrine, because of something that is happening. The question is the sun going to the right, or is it going to go backwards? And that is ambivalency. Of course, we can say the sun is always going to go east or west, but on a spiritual level, to them to say the energy can either migrate forward or go backwards. And so we are conscious of that. So we do not do work at that time because of our sun sun, and because of the nature of the busum, and because of the nature of the sun. And so we stay and wait for it to change. And now when it changes, say, ah, yes, okay, it's done, you know. And so that's a very important concept. So the Akan, you know, as we say, what sun sun is true, meaning you have a strong spirit. Is very important to do rituals, to do that, so then you can begin to use your bosom to its maximum potential. There's no limit to it. The only limitation is you. The only limitation is your sun sun and what you bring to the table in terms of your destiny. And so all these factors are very important. So I don't want to be too long-winded here. I want to give break for people who have questions. If there are any questions based on what I've talked about, let's address it at this point. Am I doing such a good job that no one has questions?
No, so now, all right, so now it's 8:30, so we're probably gonna go ahead and end because we don't want to
Okay,
Friday, and we can definitely pick this up in
okay.
terms of having general conversation.
Yes.
Does anyone have any questions though that Nana had asked about in reference to the stuff that's been discussed so far? So again, we want this to be
Challenge me, please. Please ask me.
we want this to be a conversation. We're not necessarily looking at being a lecture. So if
Yeah.
there's something that's pressing and something that you feel you want to know, this is the time to ask. I mean, you have all the times options to ask, but this is the time to,
Yeah.
say
Let's
something.
have a conversation. Let's have a conversation.
I have a question.
Yes.
Your sun sun travels when you sleep,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so I always hear that it is the witch's sun sun that attacks its family members when they're sleeping. But if the witch's sun sun can do that, wouldn't it also be true that a kung fu sun sun could do work for somebody
Definitely. And
when they're
it could be,
sleeping?
yes. In fact, one of my teachers said that he received his graduation and things through the dream world. He said, no, he had it from the dream world. Yes, you're correct. The witches, in terms of that sense, is using their sum sum. And that's why we talked about earlier, one must make the sum sum light, free of trauma, contamination, because whatever that energy is what you put forth. So if you have jealousy, envy, hatred in you, then you're going to carry that with you whether you're awake or asleep. And people who are witches can do that. The issue is in terms of witchcraft or bai, or baifu, to be more proper, bai is the energy, is that it is passed on. No one becomes a witch just by willing to be a witch in the strictest sense. It has to be passed on, just like bosom is passed on. So witches are the same way. They're within the Abusia. It's inheritable. And also the power is passed down, just like a shrine. You have a shrine passed down. They have a totem or something that is given to you, and you accept it. It can be brought in food. It can be in a material, or in something that you have in possession that has the power that the witches use. Yes. And so definitely it is all the Sun Sun. So the Kung Fu, I agree with what you said. It can do work and to cover and bless people and to assist and help them, as well as when you work. So sometimes that's one way it is validated in the dream world. And sometimes when you have a problem that you can't solve, the spirit can travel and get the medicine. My father would always say that. He would do this, you know. He's trying to solve a problem. He said, come back in a couple of days. I know what he's going to do. He's going to go to sleep and find the answer to your problem. His Sun Sun's going to travel. Maybe he'll go talk to his Busum, or he may travel and meet someone who has more knowledge or whatever and communicate that knowledge and come back, and then he can give the healing to his client. So again, you are correct. Yes.
Yo, Madasi Nana.
Pacho, good evening.
Good evening.
You discussed the shrines being passed on related to the Abusum or Busum, but I'm curious about ancestral shrines. How are those
Ah,
passed on?
normally ancestral shrines are Mount Ohene, Ohima. We do not put our regular people in that sense as ancestral shrine. And also depends on the status of the person. For example, all of the family of my father's bosom are buried in a house. When we go to them to do rituals, we go to that site which they're buried in the house and do rituals there. So my father, Nanodonko, is buried in a room. The shrine is to the opposite. He's buried there. The next Akonfu who inherit him is buried in that room as well. Nana Sabia, who trained me, is buried in a room, and Nana Asante Wenerakum is buried in a room. So we as a Akonfu are buried in rooms. And that is where people will go to do libation, but very rarely outsiders. This is mostly family, the Abusia do that. When we talk about the black stool and the things, those are mostly associated with great ancestors and chiefs who are part of town. They're the ones that have the ancestral stool house. I have not seen any
Oh.
person other than chief that has one. Does it mean that it doesn't exist? I'm not saying that. I just said I have not seen it in all the years. And I've been going to Techman since '89. And the only stool house, our ancestral stool house, are founders of the nation that have done something, and they are all associated with chief that is blackened, and then they call them. And the reason why I cannot reveal why that is because I just can't talk about it publicly of what takes place in creating these stool houses. So I'm afraid I can't give that information out.
So Nana, I think so, just to bring a little bit more clarity. So some of us have
Yes,
what we're calling ancestral
right.
shrines
I'm familiar with that.
for
Yes.
our families and for our things. So what Yao is saying in reference to passing that information on or passing that ancestral shrine on, would that be something is that a tradition that since, I've asked an Okonfo or someone to produce this ancestral shrine for me,
Mhm.
I've been pouring libation to it. I've been calling my ancestors to this place and it's working for me, right?
Right,
I
right.
want this to be able to go to someone in the family. So would it be, so most of the things that we do here in America is patrilineal. So am I going to pass this ancestral shrine from my father to my daughter or something of
Again,
that nature? Because we're dealing with,
right.
so since it's a personal connection to you here in this country.
It doesn't change the rules.
Mhm.
In all inherited things is passed on to the Busia. And I've heard that before that people are doing that. and I am neutral in terms of that. That may be a unique tradition that people are doing here because they want to establish that link.
Mhm.
But traditionally, I've seen it this way at home in Ghana, that the blackened stool is normally associated with the Ohene or Hima, and they have the stool house. And sometimes I'm witnessing them going there, but I was not allowed entry into that. Mostly the only people I knew, especially during when the chief is celebrating his yam festival, he goes in and do rituals to his ancestors and feed them and etc. And other chiefs go in there. I had to sit back and watch. Will I ever get the opportunity to go in there? I don't know. But that was the blackened stool, and it's the house that they go.
So, right,
And,
so I understand that traditionally that's
right.
what
But here,
especially
they're
back
starting a new tradition, and
so
that is acceptable if it works here. I have no problems with that because we let it talk to us and guide us so that we can maintain our culture. And if that's one way to do it, I see nothing wrong with it.
Okay. All right. Rukia has her hand raised. She had a question. Go ahead, sis.
Nana Mapaucho Madasi, first of all. My question, well, I have two actually. One is a translation that I'm curious if there is a such thing. I have done research regarding the spirits of specific days of the week. So I found information about Afi and its Kemet origin. And I'm curious to know if there's resources available regarding the different spirits related to the days of the week.
In terms of Kemetic or
So,
Akan?
well, it was an Akan. It said that the origin was Kemet and
Right.
traveled down into West Africa from the north.
Right.
The spirit that for Afi, I happened to be born on Friday, so that was my biggest interest. But I was looking for information for the other spirits of the days of the week and really couldn't find it. I spoke to a Ga Wolame, I think the confo is called, and I spoke to an Ewe herbalist, and they had a little bit of information like oral tradition about the names or the spirits related to the specific days of the week. But I wondered if there are specific resources to find information about the spirits and specific to the day of the week.
Okay. The two things I will tap on and see if that's of any help to you. We talked about the Kra and the soul and the purification and the destiny that has come. That is also viewed as a bosom, because I mentioned earlier that we do rituals as we would to a shrine in your Kra. And I'm glad you brought that because it reminds me, because we say this, and this is something, I hope you all excuse me, that a modine, that women have a bosom that is called a modine, and they say that once a month it cries blood and it drinks palm wine. And so you can see what they're talking about. So they talk about that in Ghana, and they say it's very powerful that all men should fear the spirit. And they say when man prays to it, he has to get on his knees and pray to the spirit, So they view the woman's vagina as a bosom in many things, and sometimes you will hear them call it by the name. So if you are born on Tuesday, they will call it Abner. They can use that power to do things, and that things can either to enhance a man or pull him down, that she can use it. And they talk about if she sits on the ground and make curses, look out, run the other way. So they talk about that. That's one aspect. On another aspect, we talk about the different days of the week, which we talked about, are also viewed as spirits of the day. In terms of that, you're born on whatever day, it represents that. And that's what you will take note of when you're doing rituals for yourself. And it also can also protect and guide you. That's one. Another aspect is we talk about bosom. Also, they are born on day. For example, my bosom is Kwabanabina. That means his Tuesday is his dawn. Then there's Boyao. Then his is Thursday. And then you have different bulls like Kwesi, Asutipa. His day is to Sunday. Then you have some Kofi, like I have a spirit called Kofi Akroma. His day is Friday. So again, these are also spirit of the day. and that associated or bosom of the day. But I'm not clear in terms of if you are connecting it to Western astrology and spirits of these days, or you're strictly speaking from an African perspective, mainly Akan. As far as ancient Egypt, there's a lot of stories about that, of connection that you hear. And then there's a lot of stories that I don't want to say contradicts it, but I think the verdict is out, you know, and it's beginning to get a lot of traction, where a lot of their cons saying we come from the Sudan, and they left that area because of Islam. That when this Muslim came in, they wanted to convert everybody, and the Khans wanted to maintain their independence and their culture, and they left. Then they went to Timbuktu, and then there again, who was it? I forgot the leader name. He came and he wanted to convert everybody to Islam. If not, he would kill them. And so they left and they migrated across the Volga. So you hear these stories also, but I think what's important is the archaeological evidence to support it. But again, we're getting a bit off track. But I'm hoping that answers your question about the Debusum. It does exist and it does happen. And there are lots of shrines that is associated, and towns like Tacofiano. There's a Tano there, and his Friday is his day. So the town's called Tacofiano. And so that is also there. So you'll find that, I think, throughout the Mosakan, definitely among the Bono people, that there are shrines that are associated with days itself.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. My other question was in reference to just a word. I'm curious to know if there's a word in Sri that is equal to the definition of namaste, like the divine in me recognizing the divine in you. I'm wondering if there's a word in Sri or Akan that speaks that same definition language.
That is something that is you've seen happen. And in fact, there's been research of like saying within their Akan language things that don't exist. For example, what is the word? I hope I'm pronouncing it correct. Some missionaries went into Ghana and basically they translated the Bible from their language into Twi, and that was mostly among the Aquapin. That's why they became very popular, and the language became a written language and more of an intellectual approach, because the missionaries went in there, they were sitting around that area, and so in order to change the minds of the people and convert them, they took the Bible and translated in Twi, educated them, and get them to read. So they are beginning to take these words that are basically from the Christian and wanted to put it to the Akan mind. And they came up with a I think it's famade, meaning ground things for the word matter. And then they say in Akan, they don't understand this word. It's useless to them. And this is an invention by Europeans, and it's not part of their way of thinking. So again, the whole thing of namaste, these are Indian words that are part of their culture. The closest maybe asomdre. Asomdre means peace. And that way you hear that word is part of it. And ayamye or yamfo, again, there's some, you hear those names or those words within shrine songs, and therefore it is a part of the vernacular, part of the people's language and time. But some words just cannot translate because we are changing the whole concept and paradigm of how the Khan minds work. And that to me is very important in terms of how the culture is viewed, because when we begin to take Western concepts or other cultures' concept and try to fashion it, we are bringing outside things that can change the way the culture existed by introducing something outside that can influence it to some degree. And there's plenty of that already that is going on. So I think, no, there's no word that I know of that fits them. And when you talk to them, they had no contact with those concepts of things. Just like you tell them, "Yo, I want a word for enlightenment." They're like, "I don't know, there's no such word, in their language, to my knowledge."
All right, Nana, we have Brother Sessa had a question as well.
Sure.
Sorry, greetings everyone. I was on mute. Greetings everyone. My name is Sefa Salam or Konfo Kweku Bekwe. I wanted to add a perspective from maybe the Asante understanding of like Akom, when it comes to what Mama Rukia was talking about in terms of the Bosum associated with the particular days. And I think I actually do know the document you're talking about that spoke about that. I can't necessarily speak for the validity of his work in terms of relating it back to ancient Kemet, but the idea that each day of the week there is a Bosum, as Nana said. So for example, I'm a Kweku, so I'm born on Ekwada. And so it's said that if you're born on Ekwada, the Bosum that governs that day is Eku. So if I see someone is an Akuya or a Kweku and they greet me, I could respond, yeah, Eku. And
Yeah,
so
right,
it kind of goes on based on the particular day that you're born on. And so
right,
that eku, efi, and so on
right,
it could
yeah.
be considered a bosom of that particular day. In terms of more information, I think you could look at, and he was on the last presentation that Nana gave about his book, Nana Kwesi Konadu.
Yes.
He wrote information about a calendar. I would say that's probably a good place to look as well. So he writes a lot about the calendar, and in his work, he speaks a little bit about those particular Bosum in relation to the calendar and the 42 days
Right.
that exist. So from that perspective, I'm aware of it, but I only know about those that Eku, Efi, Aju, and so on having relevance in the context of the Okra, or as Nana said, in the context of like Obusum having a particular day name. So I
Right.
just wanted to add that in there.
Thank you, thank you,
Madawa
thank you.
Sipa.
The Paulo, can I add a piece to that, because it's amazing to me that you mentioned Nana Kweku Konadu, because my name is Afiba. I went all through Ghana and everyone kept saying there's no Afiba, there's Afiba, they would say different ways and it kept saying there's no Afiba. My paternal lineage is from Jamaica, and the Maroons named a female born on Friday Afiba. That's they don't use a Fua, they don't use a Fia, they only use a Afiba. And so in Jamaica, it was viewed as Afi, the Bosum Afi's child. And so this is why I really this is why I'm doing the investigations that I'm doing, because it's amazing to me that Nana Yaw Paradini Zulu gave me the name Afiba, did the divination, and my name was Afiba, which happens to be the Friday born on Friday with my Jamaican heritage, and yada, 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 yada. And then I was told by a Bosum to feed Afi on Fridays. I should eat Eto on Fridays for the spirit of Afi. So this is why I'm asking the question. And so I really appreciate the feedback that you're both providing. Thank you.
But I would say that, like Nana said, though, this would be in the context of like your Okra. Like, so I don't think it would be like the way we may go to a Suejibi or Adadi or
Got it.
Suatano and give a like, okay, as if it's something existing separate from us.
Got
It's
it.
like, okay, we were born on Ifiada. And so we know that it's on this day that we're connecting with our Okra, and through our Okra, we may be interacting with this larger governing spirit, but not as like a separate Bosum that just someone's going to Akom in that way. Like it wouldn't really look in that type of way.
Right, and I'll add to that is that we have what are called Emrane, means powerful words or appellation. And this is what, if I could explain, when you begin to know someone personally in the day, you use those terms to stimulate their soul. So as you say, Wednesday, you say Nana Majo, you say Yaku. So he's responding to you. And so Friday, Yafi. So you hear that very common in terms of, but they're not really saying them as bosom per se. They're using it as stimulation of the soul of that day, what they call emrane, so, or appellations. So they are associated in that sense, Yajo. And so there's a story which they give about creation that tells how each day was created and how they were basically, these appellations came about and how they're associated with certain characteristics. So Friday comes from the word free, Wolfrihen, mean where do you come from? So they mean they travel. Sunday, Akosua come for Yasi. Yasi means to purify, to clean. And so they will say these people have a clean spirit. So they will use that appellation. So Monday, Drado. So Kojo is a Yajo because these people are calm and cool. And so when they meet you, they will respond that way. And Tuesday, Yabina. Abin means to be cooked or well done. And so these appellations are very common, but you only hear that when people are very closely related to you. But when they don't use that. They'll say ya son, ya nuya, or whatever. But as you begin to become familiar, they will use your personal name and the appellation that is attached to it. And that's where those words come from. And as was just mentioned, that the calendar has days, and there's the same thing in Marane, the crew kwa monophone one. And she, like I mentioned, that today is croupier. So that appellation is for Friday. And so there are words are what they call Imrane. And again, they're associated when you are invoking the bosom, they have Imrane to stimulate and motivate the bosom to respond a certain way.
All
So
right. So
I know
Nana,
we've gone
now,
over time.
it's now 8:49, so
Okay, Nana, so
but there's two things I need you to do before we break. For the audience in general, um, this is a continuous conversation in terms of what was mentioned earlier. So we will pick this up again. My question to the audience is Friday at 7, does that work for you? I would say most people it does, since you still got 27 people on and we've been on for almost 2 hours now.
really it's been that long. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's 8:50 now. So
Okay, Nana. So okay, let's
so
let them
so I just want to get some feedback from the folks in the audience. Is Friday 7 o'clock okay? Because we can change it because this is the cohort. So we'll send out emails just to the people in this group.
Which Friday, my poucher?
Friday at 7. So I'm saying this time is okay for you guys. So we can
she means next
reconvene.
Friday or in 2 weeks.
We can reconvene in 2 weeks. We can
Okay.
reconvene in 3 weeks. Whatever. But I would probably say 2 weeks is probably good. That we can send out another
Class.
invite for this for people to come and Nana to continue with with the material that he's talking about.
Fridays are good for, but it depends on which week Friday. Like on the 11th, I cannot. I can do it on the 4th, the 18th, and the 25th in October. But if you need to hash that out with other people's schedules, yeah.
So that's why I'm asking people what works for them in terms of, we want to be respectful of people's time. And we know a lot of stuff going on.
Yes. Basically Fridays are working.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Speak up, speak up. I'm not looking
There's
at
a lot in the chat.
I'm not looking at the chat. That's why I'm asking people to speak up. Yes, works for me. My preference
is-
was a bit earlier Friday, but I will my best. Okay, thumbs up, thumbs up. 6 p.m. would be better.
Yes, me pacho,
Mm,
conform with my answer. Friday will work for me.
Okay. Okay. All right, then that's cool. And the last thing is, so Nana, I'm gonna probably say we can probably do this again in 2 weeks. Today is the 27th. So you said the 11th doesn't work for you? Somebody
For
said the
me?
11th didn't work for
Yes.
them?
Right.
Yes. Yes.
So then
I'm not available on that weekend. Yeah.
so that'll probably be either the 4th or the 18th. The 4th is a week, so that's next week. That's too soon.
That's
So
too soon. Yeah. I thought maybe you were thinking
so
once a month.
um I'm open to whatever anybody wants to do, so it's not a thing for me. I don't, whatever works for the group will work for me. So I'm just trying to be courteous of other folks' time. So
Will the recordings be available?
yeah, recordings will be available. So I'm thinking every 2 weeks, and then
Let's leave it like that.
We
Yeah.
can record it, and then since you're unable to do the 11th, we can um send you the recording, and then you can always follow up in terms of
But
some, at least
now,
get you caught up in terms of what was said.
now
Okay.
let's do it around 2 so we don't lose momentum.
Right, yes. Okay, so
So
11.
let's do it in 2
And
weeks.
and then the other thing, Nana, is I want you to give a quick plug for your book. So if
Ah,
people who haven't gotten it, to please pick it up. It's a great read for those people who have read it, you can speak to it in terms of just the great information that's in it. So please, Nana,
My wife said she put the link in the chat, but this is the, oh, yeah, it's called Becoming a Modern Healer from the Ancient World of Akan. So this book basically deals with my training and the whole experience of training in Ghana and the process of how the abusia is essential. That when I went there, I went alone, as people I'm sure have heard the story before. Okay, I'm going to train, and they put everything to a halt. They said, we don't do that. And so the question was whether to send me back to America or will I come back if they do this opportunity. So I was adopted, because you have to have a family and you have to go to present to the Busum and say, this is the Abusia. I'm supporting this person in training. I'm responsible for everything. And therefore, I am going to support all their training and speak on their behalf. So he adopted me and gave me the name Sakyi after him, his family, and then went before the Bosom and said, we are his family, I'm his father, take on the responsibility. So that was very important in terms of, so it documents my whole training process and what is involved in learning Abono Akan and through the graduation and everything. So the book documents that well, and pretty much gives you an idea of some of my challenges and my experience. And sometimes it was very hard and difficult, where I thought of like thinking, is this really what I want to do? Because it's a lot more difficult and challenging than I realized, and persevered. And so I document all of that, and also my experience of what I've witnessed in Akom and questions I've asked of what it takes to be an Akomfo, and delve deeper into that. The only thing I didn't do in the book is list all the plants and everything that I experienced, because I think it would be, one, difficult to comprehend in the sense that you're not able to find that plant, because sometimes you find names change according to location. And so it was a decision that Nana Konadu and I made to take that out, but that would have made the book probably twice as long. And also I had the listing of all the suins I've made, all of the ingredients and everything. We decided to leave that out because we decided not to. So the book would have been maybe 3 times as long, because I had everything with Dhaka, every experience, everything that I witnessed, everything, because part of that is that they always say, in a comb, when we do something for you, see what is done. So if it breaks, you can repair it. And part of it is so you're not giving your power to someone else. Oh, no, I need to feed my shrine or this, or I need to repair it because it's been damaged. So therefore, they say, as a Kung Fu, you have to know how to do that. So a lot of that was all part of the training and the protocols and everything. So I think it's a good read in that sense, that it really explains how we train a Kung Fu from a Bono perspective. As Nana mentioned earlier, I'm working on the next book, which to me is going to be even much interesting. It takes it to another level and more in depth, but not so much about a comb, but about the Akan world, and about nature and why things have its name, why Dabo, the gong became a part of drumming, why drumming exists, how these things came about, why these concepts came about, in terms of why do Fupe, the month that ancestors all die, close to Yam Festival, and all of these things. So it gets very much more in depth in that sense. So that's what I'm working on. But this book right now, Becoming a Modern Healer from the World of Akom, is basically, it's a book that really helps give guidance to understanding the process of how Akom is trained, Akomfo is trained. And so it relates my experience and everything there. So I hope you all take time to purchase the book and read it. And then that again can be another conversation. We had one already, but then, when you read things a second time, it can be another conversation to explain more about Akom and how we basically fashion and relate to our Bosom. And if you choose to put it on a path, then we can do that and help your Bosom to be a path so it can function a certain way. And we can make it like a tunnel. not Tano, pure Tano come from river, but make it function and behave like one. So that is also what we can do to shrines, if that's what you desire.
So thank you again, Nana. We appreciate everybody for staying on for 2 hours.
I
Conversation.
didn't realize time went by fast. Okay.
No, that's good. That's good. That's good. I'm the timekeeper, so I'm making sure I'm watching the clock. But thank everybody else. Thanks again, everybody. I will send out another email. I'll send out a couple of reminder emails for the next date. And again, if you have any questions, you can reach myself. You can text info@aconcenter.org. And do you want to leave an email for people can reach out for you?
Yeah, and they can feel free to contact me. Don't think I'm not friendly or anything like that. You can come and ask me questions and we can talk. So I'm open to that. So either call me on my phone. Well, is that a good idea? Or, you can do that. Or email me. Doesn't matter. Email me, or I can give you my phone and you can text me. Let's put it that way. Give
Me
my number
Pacho, I need
out.
both.
Huh?
Me Pacho, I would like both, please.
Okay, so I'll give my number and my email. So if you text me, by all means, a response. So my number is 786-751-0325. 786-751-0325. And my email is Sakyi, as you see, Nana Kweku, Sakyi Komfo. I think my wife said she put it in the chat. You did? So she put everything in the chat, so it's there for you. Okay, again, I'd like to thank Nana Amwa very much for making this happen. And hopefully I'm able to pass something on that can benefit you and share with you my knowledge and experience. And I hope that you can do the same with me, share your knowledge and experience, and we can have a conversation. Again, let's really try to make it a conversation as opposed to one way I find I'm doing too much talking. And therefore, if you have some things like at the end and others were given the viewpoints, let's do that, because we can begin to create a culture and by which, bridges the way we're doing based on our experience there and also our experience here, but yet still maintain the integrity of our home.
All right. Thanks again. Good night, everybody. And we will
Thanks.
see you on the 11th. I'll send out some information for everybody. All right.
Thank you all very much.
Right. Dasi, Achille.
Madasi, Madasi, Madasi.
Cannot happen without you all.
Peace and blessings, everyone. Stay safe, stay well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That's fantastic.